Okay, so let's digest and discuss, right? So lots of stuff going on here. I will say right off the bat that the most critical stuff for me as far as how interested I am in this expansion has not really been talked about all that in depth, so I don't actually know how hyped I am. I'll know when I get to see some of the information that comes out of the deep dive panels tomorrow. I don't have a BlizzCon ticket. I'm not supporting Blizzard in that manner this year, um, just on principle. But I'll get that information through, Wowhead or whatever else that it is that I need to in order to come up with a researched opinion and kind of figure out how excited I am as far as this goes. So let's run through the stuff that they talked about and what I think about it. If you're in the chat and you want to contribute, jump in and let's talk about things. For everyone who's been commenting, I've been reading. I just haven't been responding too much because I want you to be able to listen to the panel here. Trying not to talk over too much there. I got some words in that time. Had a little more space than I did in the Overwatch one. So all right, we're going to the Shadowlands. First off, I said this when I did the initial reaction to the trailer. I'm not really interested in Sylvanas all that much. I'm kind of tired of Sylvanas. I don't care about Sylvanas. I don't care about her story, all that kind of good stuff. So, story wise, that whole component and it being a central piece of the story, I just don't care, which is unfortunate. But Shadowlands look interesting. The Maw sounds interesting. The Figures of Death, that sounds cool. Covenants, all the other stuff that doesn't revolve around Sylvanas is pretty interesting. I can't say I'm like insanely excited about it, but it's at least it's good enough, right? It's about as good as any of the other expansions have been. So that's fine. I like the Lich King being a part of it. That's pretty cool. Going to Icecrown, all that kind of good stuff. I like that we're getting into the Shadowlands and the death stuff. All the souls getting funneled into the Maw. That's cool. It kind of ties in with everything that Sylvanas has been saying cryptically and the old gods have been saying cryptically. So it'll be kind of fun to see where that goes. I'm honestly just tired of Sylvanas. So all right, so we get into the Shadowlands. We've got these 4 different zones. I kind of tried to slip in a little bit of what I thought about each one of them. I might not remember the names correctly, but we got Bastion, which is really cool. I like the architecture there. Some of the armor I saw in the earlier little kind of gameplay footage looked pretty cool for that. The vampire one is obviously awesome. Vampire Hunter D, all that kind of good stuff looks pretty sweet. Castlevania looking stuff. Then you got the crazy Undead Warlock zone. And the last one, what was the last one? Oh, the fairy forest, the enchanted forest one. That's pretty interesting as well. So you go in, you pick a covenant. So you're gonna get 1 active ability for the covenant, maybe 2. I think we saw 2, the spear and the little movement speed ability there. That's kind of generic for everybody. 1 class ability. I don't know how I feel about that. Like locking you into one particular covenant. It sounds like maybe there's not going to be a way to change covenants if you want to down the road, but you're kind of permanently locked in, is what it sounds like. It kind of depends on how central to your rotation that one ability is going to be. If it's kind of like if you think of it as like a long cooldown ability, maybe for offense or defense or something like that, then maybe it's not too bad as long as it's not something that fits into that 5, 6, 7 ability core rotation you use every single fight. I think that could complicate things. And they're talking about player agency, and it's cool that you can pick a covenant and kind of progress in that way. But I think that I think in a way you're taking away player agency by locking that ability into a covenant, because you're saying, hey, if you think this Castlevania covenant is cool, but you love the ability from Bastion, too bad. You can't sync those up. So I think that's a conflict there with the player agency. It's cool that you get to make a choice, but I don't like tying that gameplay choice to it. It's like you know, if you're picking the covenant, chances particular covenant, chances are you're picking it because you like the story, you like the characters, you like the look, or you know, you think it fits with your character's kind of storyline. But that's not always going to be the case with the ability that they give it. You know, it depends on how over the top it is. Maybe if you, I'm just going to keep calling it the Castlevania covenant. Maybe if you go over there and you get an ability where you know, you turn into a vampire or something like that, syncs up really well with the look and feel um, of that covenant. So maybe that works okay because the look, the feel, the characters, the story is probably what you're invested in for that covenant anyway. But we'll have to see how it turns out and how strong those abilities are. Let's see. BFA feels like the most boring AP essence grind. I find myself just not getting on anymore because I wanted to do fun stuff. That's where I'm at. Everybody is asking, hey, you know, are we going to get more Warcraft guides, Warcraft, World of Warcraft? And it's like, hey, I don't hate World of Warcraft at all. I just, BFA is not fun. And so anyone who's been asking me recently, hey, are we going to get more WoW content? My response has been, yeah, you are, but it's probably going to be the next expansion before I really make more content because the game's just, it's not fun to me right now. And we're going to get into this in a few minutes. Let's see. A bit surprised we didn't hear a new race or class announcement. They got all the allied races going. Class announcement, I feel like that's probably another expansion or two off. Don't think they want to touch classes. More cosmetics, and it won't be a big deal. Yeah, there's been some interesting ideas floating around about all that kind of stuff. Restoring the Sanctum sounds kind of cool. They said there'd be some choices there as far as that goes. That sounds kind of like garrisons, but I'm wondering how they're going to pull that off, whether it's going to be a group thing or a single thing, like a solo thing. That sounds cool, though. Like, you know, maybe you get some you know, garrison style choices where you get to pick what facilities go into your sanctum. I'm not sure. They didn't go too in depth in that, but they mentioned it. The new cosmetics, the cloak replacements, all that kind of good stuff. That sounds pretty sweet. I do think it'll be interesting if you can get that juxtaposition of being like in warlock gear with those like angel wings. That would be pretty hilarious. Obviously, those would look great on a paladin, right? It just kind of screams paladin, or maybe even warrior to some degree. But seeing that on like a warlock or a demon hunter would be pretty funny. And I mean, it seems like that's going to be an option. So I may go that direction with a couple of my alts just to kind of laugh about that. Pre-patch for the Scourge. Pre-patches are always pretty cool. I think having Bolvar as our quest guy as opposed to Khadgar is going to be pretty sweet. It'll be cool to see a lot more of Bolvar. And I honestly think he looked cooler with the Lich King helm off. So I think that's pretty cool. No freeform zones. So the leveling is going to progress from one zone to the other. When I first heard that, I was like, I don't know if I love that because I play so many alts and I just want to change it up sometimes. I don't want to progress through this straight thing. But at the same time, I was like, you know what? I did like the linear progression from previous expansions on the first character, right? I liked being able to go and have a clear path plotted out for me. So I had mixed feelings about it. I was like, okay, on my first character, yeah, I like that. I like knowing, hey, from here to here, this is my progression. And then when they came in, they said, hey, on your alts, it's more like a new game plus style where you can just pick a covenant right from the beginning, start making progress on that. You can change up the order of the zones and all that stuff. That's great. That's the best of both worlds for me. Start out on that first character. And have that linear progression. That also makes it a little bit more important to kind of pick a main character when you start the expansion. So I feel like that's a great video opportunity there too. Hey, what class are you going to play for your main? So you can get all the way through and then do whatever you want on your alts. Because you have to get to that point where you pick a covenant for that to kick in for your alts. So if you're trying to play like 3 characters at once, you got to follow that linear progression. And so, yeah, I think that's going to be a good video opportunity. And just a good chance to try to help people decide what class they're going to play, which is kind of what I'm all about. Helping you learn your class, helping you pick your class, kind of doing a lot of the legwork for you. So I'm looking forward to that. max level zone of the Maw, where it sounds like you're going to have to do some really long corpse runs, which also brings up a funny point. What happens when you die in the Shadowlands? What happens when you pull too many mobs? Where do you go? I mean, you're already in the Shadowlands. There's no spirit healer to go, hey, no, come back to Azeroth. So it'll be fun to see what happens as far as that goes. So the mall's got freeform outdoor gameplay, no Hearthstones, and also I wrote down Dark Souls vibe. That's kind of what I was getting from the way the mall was being described, is like, you know, you're going to go in here and it really sounds like, hey, you've got to pay attention to what you're doing. Don't pull those extra mobs. I think it would be cool if they had some kind of weird survival element in there, even though I hate survival games. It didn't sound like that was going to happen, so don't quote me on that or anything, but that's kind of the vibe that I was getting. You got to be more careful. It's going to be a little more dangerous, at least in terms of you having to spend more time running back to your corpse if you screw it up. We're going to come back around to the tower. And I'm going to skip over that for right now, because I think out of everything that I've heard, that's the thing I'm most excited about. So we'll get there. So we're going to have 8 dungeons, 1 per zone as you're leveling up, 4 at endgames. That's pretty standard stuff. 10 boss raid. I just wrote Dracula raid. That's pretty much what it is. We'll have to see whether or not I'm raiding when we get to that point. It definitely looks like a cool raid. I like raids with wings where you can choose which direction you want to go. That's something that's always really cool. So player agency was a big thing. It's got to be a big thing because they basically killed it in Battle for Azeroth. There's like basically one way you play your class. There's one rotation. There's, you know, it makes it good for guides, right? Because you can just go, hey, this is what you do. But I would much rather be able to pick a class and make a video and say, hey, here's one way you could play this character. Here's another, or make a couple different videos and go, you know, hey, here's how you play, you know, Axe Fury Warrior. Or here's how you play Dragon's Breath Fury Warrior. Here's how you play this build. Like, I much rather would do something like that than just go, hey, here's the one way you play Fury Warrior. That's something I'm actually excited for in Diablo 4, is being able to go, hey, here's this build that I'm playing with this character. Check this out. You go to the Shadowlands. So yeah, variety in gameplay is good for content, right? For YouTube, making videos, but it's also just, it's good for the player. It's good for you to have options. It's good for you to be able to, this will be on in the background. I'm not actually watching the Hearthstone thing. Hearthstone is dead to me, and we're going to talk about Legends of Runeterra later on in a different video, and that's what I'm really hyped about as far as card games go. But player agency is good for gameplay, right? Because you could do all your leveling one way and then change up the way you're playing the class for in-game, and then when you're kind of like, you know, I don't know, you change and you play a different way, or you get an item that syncs really well with a particular build that maybe wasn't as great before, or you didn't want to try, and it pushes you into doing that, and you know, that ability is really cool. So I'm interested to see if they do anything different with talents, whether we get a new talent tree or they just realign this one with the 60 levels, or what goes on there. I think the player agency in picking your weekly chest item is good. Like, you get a roll for like 6 things, and you know what I was getting from that is, like, if you did like 20 dungeons, your chest would go, hey, this guy's done 20 dungeons, we probably want to give him a piece of dungeon gear. Roll out of 20 of them, here's 6, pick which one you want. And if you don't want any of them, there's a backup item. I think it could be like a currency, like you get badges or something, and you could eventually turn it in for a specific piece of gear. I think that'd be a good route to go. That's not what they said, but I think that'd be a good route to take. I always think that is that's a good thing to have. A little bit of randomness, so you have something to work towards, but at the same time, you do have some choice within that randomness. It's like, not like I got this one item and that's my only option. They talked about build a legendary. So you unlock the ability to get these legendary powers, and then you can kind of build an item around that. I think that would be an interesting system if it was kind of like the Azeroth armor, where you unlock essences essentially, and then you can pick the piece of gear that you want to put that legendary power into. That could be cool. That could give you a lot of agency and let you build different types of builds as well, because you wouldn't imagine if there were two legendary rings and you love the effects from both of them, but well, rings is a bad example. Let's go to, two legendary shoulders, and you like the effects from both of them. You could never combine those because you could only wear one shoulder item. But if there were a system like this where you could kind of take that ability and put it onto a piece of gear, then you can mix and match legendaries, and that would be pretty interesting. Streamlining leveling. So 120s are going to be level 50. You're going to level up to level 60. I'm interested to see what the pacing is on that. It sounds like 1 to 50 should be relatively quick. You play through an expansion and you're level 50, but I imagine the pacing for 50 to 60 will probably be similar to what we get on an average expansion anyway, because they got to keep us roped in for that monthly money. Every level unlocks something that's huge. Like for me, from the beginning of Battle for Azeroth, one of my biggest complaints was I'm leveling, but my levels aren't giving me anything. It's pointless. I just hit level 115 and nothing happened. Literally nothing happened except my level changed, or my stats went up a little bit, but I didn't get an ability, I didn't get a talent, I didn't get anything cool. You be quiet. I'm going to scroll down. The video's just... Oh, look at that. And it pops it up in front of me. Go away. You're distracting me. So that's good. I want to return to getting something every level. I think that's going to be awesome. Flexibility for alts in terms of being able to pick different expansions, play through one expansion or the core game, I'm assuming, and get to level 50 is really cool. So you could just jump right into Legion, jump right into BFA. They didn't quote those, but I'm assuming that would be the case. The character customization options, when they put that up on the screen, I was like, I hope this is more than what I think they're going to do. And it wasn't. I was hoping they were going to revolutionize the character customizer and really give you the level of customization options you have in other MMOs. But this just looks like they kind of went, we're going to give you more options, which more options is good. But really what I wanted to see is height sliders, or you can be fat, you can be skinny, all that kind of stuff. And one of the big things in World of Warcraft is they always want to have a consistent silhouette, but they're taking that away with the backpack items and having the wings and that kind of stuff. So I was kind of hoping that they would go more towards that slider style, or stuff like that. So it's like we got more hair options, and then they added other things like, hey, here's some body tattoos, which I think look cool but are stupid because they're almost always under your armor. Although again, with transmog you can hide almost everything now, so I guess you could make that stuff visible, but then you're getting cool looking gear and you're not showing it off. So seems like a contradiction to me. So I was hoping they would do something more. And then everyone could be a DK. That's cool. I've gotten pretty attached to my Worgen DK, so I don't know if I'll change. I probably won't change. Although I find, a Pandaren Death Knight to be pretty hilarious. That might be a fun alt. So I got 2 more things to talk about. I'm going to check in with chat really quick and go over some of this stuff here. Let's see. Enjoy your videos, but also don't blame me for not wanting to make yourself sit through a boring expansion to do it. That's pretty much where it's at. I want to find games, and I have found some games where I can make guides. World of Warcraft is one of those, but BFA is just, for me, I feel like it's run its course. But I'm super excited to make more open world content guides, tanking guides, and who knows from that, where it's going to go from there, for the new expansion, which we didn't get a date on. That's another thing to take note of. Arcane Mage, so I can hate myself. Gives you the ability to present a variety of gameplay, make it more like ESO on builds. I don't actually like the build system in ESO. I don't think it's super bad. I just personally don't like the setup for it. More like classic talents would be sweet. Yeah, I think some kind of system like that would be really cool. I was really excited when I saw that kind of stuff in D4. Hitting 115 often means that the amount of crit mastery and haste go down. Yeah, hitting 115 often means that you feel weaker than you did before, which is awful. All right, so let's talk about the two things left here. So the first one is class gameplay. They said there's going to be a focus on class identity. And when I started this rant, that was what I was talking about at the very beginning. That's the most important thing to me. More than story, more than zones, more than legendaries, more than gear, more than player customization as far as, your character and what it looks like. All that stuff is great, but if the gameplay of the class isn't good, I'm really genuinely not interested. And that's been the problem with Battle for Azeroth, is that initially when I started making videos and stuff, I was really pumped. New expansion, new class, or not new classes, but I wanted to figure out what character do I want to play, and I was looking for videos that kind of covered those characters in depth the way that I wanted, so that I could do more than go, oh, hey, here's the differences between 110 and 120. I wanted to know, well, I've never really played an Arcane Mage, so what does an Arcane Mage do? What's their rotation look like? What are their talents? I couldn't find those videos, and I made those videos. I was really excited for everything, but as the expansion progressed, they didn't add those systems that really gave you that player agency and really made you feel like, hey, the mage that I'm playing is my mage. I've made all these choices that have made my mage unique to me, and I'm telling a story about this character and how it plays. Instead, it just felt like, oh, I'm playing Frost Mage, and this is my 5/6 ability rotation, and I need XYZ, and that's it. So for me, if it's a similar situation in Shadowlands, it'll kill the expansion for me. So they didn't talk about this too much, so I can't actually say how excited I truly am for the expansion yet. They talked about a return to class identity. I think that's probably a good thing because it means that they're pulling more into the core, and instead of each spec playing like 3 different classes, maybe they'll pull into the class core, put a lot more there, and make the choices that you make in specialization and within each specialization more meaningful. And if they do that, then that will allow for more player agency. That'll allow for more unique builds. It'll allow my mage or my warrior or my death knight to be different from the one you're playing, especially in combination with some of these other systems like legendaries and that kind of stuff. So we'll see. I'll have to see what's going on with there. I will say, what am I looking for? I've said it a bunch of times already. I'm looking for the ability for my character to be different from your character. And what I'm really looking for, and I've said this time and time again, is something closer to the rune system that they use in Diablo 3, where essentially your class has the same core of abilities, right? You have the same options. You kind of pick the ones that are most important to you, but then you're given the opportunity to change the way the gameplay of those abilities works. So, for example, I've been playing Prot Warrior in Battle for Azeroth. So, one of the abilities you get on a Prot Warrior is you get a Shockwave, right? And this is the ability on like a 45-second cooldown, I think, something around there. But you do a shockwave in a cone in front of you, and it stuns any of the enemies that you hit, right? So what I would want to see is like, okay, maybe shockwave is something that all warriors have. But if you're an arms warrior, then when you do shockwave, you don't stun, right? Prot warriors stun. Arms warriors, maybe instead you knock people back, right? So all of a sudden you have this option between a CC stun or a CC knockback. Maybe when you're a fury warrior, you do that shockwave and it puts bleeds on everybody. So that's a very like small, minute idea of what you could do between the different specs. But then once you're on the different specs, you could also have the opportunity to change those abilities even further. So I'm on Prot Warrior, my Shockwave, it hits in a cone and it stuns. Well, maybe instead of that, I can change that Shockwave to where it hits in an AoE around me, kind of like Thunderclap, but it doesn't stun anymore, but it will hit everything around me. Or maybe I can change it so that it has a lower cooldown, but a lower stun time. Or maybe I can change it where instead of stunning things, it generates a super high amount of threat. Or instead of doing a shockwave, I charge through the enemies and they get stunned. So it's now like a mobility type thing. So that's really the kind of customization that I want to see. If you're going to have something that's unique to the class, give it variance between, or it's central to the class, give it variance between specs, and you could even within a spec give it even more variance. So maybe you're playing an arms warrior who has a shockwave that instead of hitting in a cone, you jump and you stun everything around you. But I'm playing a prot warrior, and instead of having a cone shockwave, I'm doing, the AoE all around me, and it generates extra threat. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to see when it comes to class customization. Will they do that? Will it get that deep? Will it get that in depth? I doubt it. But the important thing is that they head in that direction, right? Even if it's not that crazy in depth, that's what I want to see. So we'll see. There's a deep dive tomorrow. I won't be able to watch it live, but I'll watch it after the fact, or I'll dig things up on Wowhead, and we'll talk about it then. So the last thing that I want to talk about, that kind of is the hinge on where my enjoyment of the expansion kind of rests upon, whether or not that class identity, spec identity, that gameplay is really there. But they are adding in something really cool that really does speak to me as a gamer. My main types of games I like to play: card games, roguelikes, turn-based strategies, and cooperative games. Those are kind of the four things for me. So this tower, this new game mode, like in the mall, this tower, this endless dungeon that they drew upon roguelike influences and inspirations in order to create. This sounds really cool. This sounds like something that is just a gold mine for making videos. Hey, soloing the tower on a restoration druid, soloing the tower on a fury warrior. Those kind of videos would be great. Best compositions, all that kind of good stuff. That sounds great from a content creator's perspective, but from a gameplay perspective, this is the kind of stuff I like to get into. Put me in the tower, this endless dungeon. Let me see how far I can progress. And they went to the next level. They went where I needed them to go with this, where they said, you're going to get permanent upgrades that you can leave the tower with. That's cool. I don't necessarily like that because it might make the tower feel mandatory to progression outside of the tower, which I kind of feel like the tower should be the tower for its own sake. Like the mage tower, it gave you a cool cosmetic thing, but it didn't really let you take gameplay elements out. So for me, if there was a class I didn't want to do mage tower on, I could just go, I'll live without these cosmetics and not do it. Whereas you might feel if there are these permanent upgrades that come out and they affect gameplay, you might feel like I have to go do this content or I can't get this upgrade and my character's going to suck. But either way, it gives you a reason to play if you're not super interested. But the cool thing I like, they showed this off, the anima abilities that you were going to be able to get. These looked like card choices in Slay the Spire, or relics that you can get in like Risk of Rain and other roguelike games, where essentially, you probably climb a floor, and from one floor to the next floor, you get a choice between 3 different options, and you're able to affect what goes on as you continue on in the tower. So we saw some choices for Shaman, where Shaman had the ability of like Flame Shock last forever. So that's cool. I like the Warlock build where you get, I forget, is it Corruption? I think Corruption. I want to say it's corruption, just lasts forever. So you get a corruption on something, it's gonna die eventually. So having a cool option like that was pretty awesome. There was another one, I forget what it said, but it was like your fire abilities get enhanced, but then you can't cast any water abilities. So that was a really cool choice that you get to make. And I believe you're going to make several of those choices as you continue on into the tower. And not only that, I imagine those choices are going to be randomized. So it's not like, okay, floor 1 to 2, you get these 3 options 1, 2, 3, pick each, pick the one that you want. If that is the case, it means you're going to be able to make guides on like choices at each step. But I think it would be more fun if they were random and you had to work with what you were given at the time. Also, I will note that I was looking at those 3 choices for Shaman, and there were not any new skills on those 3 choices. It was all stuff that we've seen before. So I was looking, I was like, is there a gameplay queue? There wasn't. So this tower sounds really cool. It sounds really fun. It sounds like something that I would like to play a lot of. It sounds like because you can go in solo, this is going to be a great place to test alts, to show off the gameplay for different specializations and classes. A lot of times I go in and I'm like, how do I showcase a healer? I don't know how that's going to work in the tower. We'll see. I know for Mage Tower is more like a scenario where you had to heal things. So there was stuff going on there. The tower sounds like you probably just kill stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how they accommodate for that on a healer. But either way, I got to know more about the class gameplay. That being said, all this other stuff, the Sylvanas story, the Covenants, the Sanctum, the leveling, that's all well and good. The tower, I think, is what has got me hooked, especially if the class gameplay is really good. So, man, that was a mouthful. Every time between this, I'm amazed by how much stuff I fit in between these panels, even though this Hearthstone panel is already gone. Look at that. You just see that? Did you see that yawn? Glad I'm not watching this panel. I just pulled in just oh. All right. Well, I was waiting on BlizzCon to come around so I could get an idea of what Blizzard has coming up in the future. And the reason that I wanted to know about that is because the stuff that we've seen here today is going to drastically influence the direction of my channel, the content that I cover on my channel. And I want to be able to give you, the viewers, whether you're on Twitch or YouTube or wherever, I want to be able to give you a definitive answer as to what is going on with my channel. I know it's been a little bit in flux, mostly because I haven't wanted to stop making content, but I also have been unsatisfied with Battle for Azeroth, and that's kind of the foundation that my channel has been built upon. I'm going to take all this stuff. I got notes. That's one page. I got more notes on the back. I'm going to take this. I'm going to look at the rest of the information we get over the course of the weekend from some of these deep dive panels. What's class gameplay look like? All that kind of good stuff. And I'm going to put all that together. I'm going to figure out what I'm playing, what I intend to cover on my channel. A lot of these games aren't going to be out, in the next 6 months or the next year. So, I may say like, hey, I'm definitely going to cover Diablo 4, but that could be 2 years down the road, right? So that's a statement of intention, but it doesn't mean that it's going to drastically affect the channel, other than I might cover news about it. But I'm going to take all this information, I'm going to digest, I'm going to take some other info, some other announcements that have come out from other companies, Riot Games, if you want a hint. And I'm going to figure out where I'm at. I'm going to figure out what games, what topics, and everything I'm covering. And I will have a video out within the next week or two, kind of covering that. I hope those of you who are here on Twitch watching me, play indie games and all that kind of stuff are here for me, for the content, creator, not necessarily the content itself, although hopefully that's good. And I hope that you'll come forward with me as the channel grows and evolves. And I think unless they really screw up the class stuff, I mean, like World of Warcraft, I don't think it's going anywhere. It just might not be a 24/7 all the time thing. So hopefully they take some good cues, they make some good choices with the class direction, and we'll see where that goes.